Wait a second.
Ladies and gentlemen, the following is scheduled for one fall. It is time for That Way Cool Wrestling Show!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to That Way Cool Wrestling Show. My name is Danny J. I'm joined with Charles Gemini Gregory. Out of the Gap Mark Studios, we have Mark Lindsay. Mark, how you doing, buddy? There you go. And we are very excited today. Today we have two of the greatest tag team wrestlers that I've known from the World Wrestling Federation. I believe the uncrowned tag team champions. We have via phone out of Tampa and Minnesota, respectively. We have B. Brian Blair, Jumpin Jim Brunzell, right here on That Way Cool Wrestling Show. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Danny. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, because today the bees are buzzing, buzzing, and the hives are live, and we're so excited to be on the Way Too Cool podcast with Asian Friends Live. So let's start buzzing and talk some job, guys. Let's do it.
Brian, you're way too awake.
Man, you guys, I'm awake at 6:30, ready to rock and roll and start and throw, and I'm just having fun all day long. I'm busy. I got a schedule, and I'm on schedule right now. So we got 37 minutes and 23 seconds.
There you go. Say that's good. It's
I think somebody should hold Brian back. He's going to try to run to the ring right now.
He is. I know. Now, the funny thing was, I was talking to Jimmy yesterday, and I said, you do any in-ring work still? And he goes, oh, no. Not anymore. He was like, no. Let's not talk about that at all anymore.
In-ring work. Okay, first of all, I'm 50, gentlemen, and I used to love watching you. And when I wrestled for 18 years in the Indies, and you guys were just one of my favorites to watch because of the technical things you used to do and the pace, and you always told a story in the ring. But in the ring now, I'm 50. I don't think I can climb in the ring, let alone run to the ring. So, but I was talking to Dan.
Yeah.
One of my biggest things about you guys, and I've always said, you guys had a great following. It seems like you just didn't get that push. You know, the fans loved you. I was 18 at the time, and I just loved you guys. Was there, you ever think there was a reason, or just the game that was played, or whatever?
Well, I could answer that real quick on my behalf.
Yeah.
Right.
First of all, George Scott was a booker, and George and I had a previous background in history, and when he hired me at the WWF, he said, "Oh, forget about the past." Well, he fired me in North Carolina, and also I think the fact that I probably caused our team not to get the biggest push because I had a couple litigations against Vince when I first came in that were prior to the contract that I signed, and I wound up winning some small financial settlements that were reversed to me, and I think that he held that against me. And to be honest with you, he and I never did hit it eye to eye. So I think that
I never even knew that, Jimmy. I never even knew that about the lawsuits prior, as long as I've known you.
Yeah. Well, that was the truth, because see what happened was, and I'll make this real brief. Greg Gagne signed my name on a contract, and it produced these high flyer dolls from a company, and I was supposed to get $12,500. Well, Vince said, "No, you're under contract with me," so they took the $12,500.
Oh.
And consequently, that was wrong. It was my money, because they even though Greg did forge my
your body suffered and earned that. Your body suffered and earned that.
Well, and what happened was, to make a long story short, I got the money back, and Vince, I think, didn't like the fact that I fought for my right, and I was right and he was wrong.
Wow. That's right, and that's good, and that's good when you're able to do that. I didn't know that, and I'm really proud of you for doing that, because you were in the right. Absolutely, I mean, that's great. That's greed. But you know how I get along good with Vince myself. We've had a lot of great times together. And I know Jimmy and him have been at odds. Jimmy and Jesse tried to start a union one time. That went over like a fart in church, you know. Man, so a lot of things have caused some animosity, or you know, we'd be definitely, and I feel, in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Absolutely, because we used to watch tape. I trained over at the Monster Factory, and we used to watch tape.
We did get to be. We were world champions in the Universal Wrestling Federation.
Universal, yes.
Okay, yeah,
yes, I see that.
Steve Williams.
Yeah, but we used to watch. They used to have us watch video. I was a tag team. I was tag team for 18 years. We used to watch video of how you worked in the ring. You got. They used to always show you guys. They used to show the Gagnes. They used to show the Rougeaus. I was a big fan also of the Islanders at the time, because we were at the time we were two very big guys when we wrestled, and we tried to emulate some things that you did, but when you're 340 pounds, it just doesn't work. But your tag, the way you tagged in the stories you told, and your flow that we used to watch, I'm telling you, it was the greatest thing in the world. And then when you used to put the mask on, you don the mask, I thought that was so over. We used to go nuts when we seen the mask come out, you know. And me and my cousin were both two bald-headed black guys, huge. And we used to do the switcheroo. We used to call it the switcheroo. And he used to call it in the ring. He said, "Do the killer bees." I swear, he said, "Do it." And I said, "Laugh." In the middle of the ring, he goes, "Let's do it." I'm like, "Okay."
And the funny thing is, they didn't need masks because these two look alike.
We look like twins.
We
look like twins. 6 foot, 310 pounds apiece. Look just like twins, bald heads with bad, temperament.
Yeah.
But we would try to move like you. And my drop kick only hit someone in like the waist. I never got, chest area. But I could do it. I used to hit the drop kick. I got a couple times on shorter guys. I hit the chin. And that was the greatest thing to me. I was like, "Oh, I called him in the chin almost." Wow.
I was saying to Jim yesterday, we were on the phone for a little bit, and I was saying to him that when the Bees came out, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, was that roughly 86, 87?
86.
85.
85, okay. Between that time frame.
Was it Christmas 85?
Yes.
About that, right? Okay, because around that time frame, we still had tag teams of just individual wrestlers, which is kind of like what they've gone back to nowadays. But
because I was tag team with Tony Gurria.
Yeah.
Before this time.
And I was saying how there's never been a Killer Bees. You know what I mean? Like we've had.
There's been a lot of wannabes.
Really? But I
humbly say that.
At that time, you had the Bulldogs, the Heart Foundation, and you guys, and this is pre-Rockers and all that. But now, obviously in JCP, you had the Rock and Roll Express, and you had more prominent tag team wrestling. But you guys, I always thought were kind of ahead of your time because the gimmick was so original. And it was so basic in its simplicity that it was like, oh, this is just so over for me. I was like, I like the color. I like the way they move because you guys were fast. And then to see you guys work the Islanders and teams like that, I was like, this is just great tag team wrestling. Now, I know the World Wrestling Federation wasn't big on tag team wrestling, but you guys, I thought, were such a front runner up in the top because you were visually something to look at.
Yeah.
Well, let me add to that. When the WWE started early on, and Brian and I were there, they had 60 guys, and they had 3 towns a night. So they sort of spread 20 guys in each town. So they were forced to make up tag teams.
Right.
Otherwise they would have had 12 matches every night or whatever it was.
Yeah.
10 matches, and it was just too long of a night. So, they put us together, and then the fact that we, had the mask was very unique, and we could have gone both ways with that. But for some reason or other, like we said earlier, they chose not to push us. We had some great matches, probably some of the great matches we had, and people don't realize that. We had a great match with Bulldogs in Montreal,
Mhm.
half an hour draw, which was incredible. And then we had countless matches with the Heart
Yeah.
that were exceptional matches. Rick Martel and what's his name?
Tito Santana.
Tom Zink.
Oh, Tom Zink,
Tom
the
Zink.
Can-Am. Yeah, the Can-Am
And the
connection.
Rougeos, I mean, and we had good matches with just about everybody. I mean,
Everybody. We never had a bad match. If you can show me a bad match that we had matches. We had a match. One time I was late for Madison Square Garden because I was with my wife who just came from the Catskill Mountains, and I went skiing, almost killed myself, almost never went to the show. That's another long story. But anyway, I'm late. I get fined $500 for being late. We're supposed to be going on in like 5 minutes. So I rushed, get my stuff on. We're working with the Heart Foundation. I don't know if you remember this, Jimmy. And we're doing a 15-minute Broadway or 20-minute Broadway. And then that's a 20-minute Broadway. It's on YouTube. And I'll tell you what, show me a flaw on that match.
Okay.
Right.
Well, at that time, you had already been in the ring.
Show me, was the crowd into that match or what? I mean, when you feel an audience, there's nothing like being in a modified pair of underwear in front of a sold-out house like Madison Square Garden, and knowing that you've got those people in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
Knowing that you can make them laugh, you can make them cry, you can make them happy, you can control all the emotions, and you know how to pull the strings. Well, that's what wrestling should be. I mean,
Now, obviously, you guys were great
today,
chances.
a lot of the guys could do that. Like, come off the fly, like I was just talking about in Madison Square Garden, come off the fly, and Jimmy and I had no time to talk or nothing, and just go out in the ring and just have a harmonious match that was exciting. That takes a lot of practice, a lot of studying. I mean, that's why I miss the territories.
Well,
that's something that taught us all our foundation.
Well, as I noticed lately, I've been watching. We watch a lot for the show.
Yeah.
A lot of things are so scripted now. Is like they don't give you any room to be yourself. When I, towards the end, when we were working, I used to get a lot of young guys, and the guy would go, "I'll get you in the corner and give you 8 punches," and I would look at him like, 8 punches, really, dude? You're gonna sit there and think I'm gonna count your 8 punches? And they would get mad at me because they try to talk to me as soon as I walked in. I mean, I would walk me getting dressed, and they want to talk over a match, and we're like the 8th match. We're semi-main event. I'm like, can we talk after intermission? And they would get angry. I'm not going to talk that long about something and go on and think I'm going to remember.
Right.
But nowadays, it seems like things are so scripted, like so scripted. I mean, I can call it by watching it. And back in the day, there was more of a personality towards the match. Like in the ring, do you feel that that's a huge difference since, from now to then?
Oh, huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, you guys were so electrifying when you were out there, and it just seemed like there was no room for a script, I
mean, you would run around.
Well, everything is geared for TV, and they have to be right on their cues. And the problem is they're so they over embellish the microphone to the point where I can't watch it anymore. When they introduce the guy and he grabs the mic and he's so theatrically involved with that microphone and all these pauses and all this melodramatic bullshit. Yeah. And then a guy comes running in, they have a match, and then another guy comes running in, and then all hell breaks loose, and it's the same thing every time. And you talk about the everything being set up. One thing, when Bobby Heenan who was probably one of the greatest interviewers of all time, at the very end, he showed me 10 pages of interviews that he had to memorize, and Bobby only had an 8th grade education. He could barely read, and he told me, he said, "I can't do this anymore." Wow. Because everything was choreographed to the point that it was they're like robots out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's why we don't have like anybody really that's like, for example, for as long or as short as anybody's career, the Killer Bees, the Islanders, I mean, we can even go with the Young Stallions just as a comparison. These are guys that, for whatever stretch of the word, have some sort of a legacy because we remember. We remember these guys. We remember what you've done. And I got news for you. With today's talent, I have trouble remembering who's who. And I'm watching it every week, you know? And I mean, I personally have our group. I personally can't even watch WWE television anymore because of how scripted it is. I watch other indie feds and stuff like that. But like, it's one of those things where, you know, you guys set an example, and then it looks like nowadays the example's not even being followed anymore.
Well, I appreciate that. You mentioned the Islanders.
Yeah.
Jimmy, did anybody intimidate anybody as much as Haku and Barb?
Absolutely
when
not.
you got in the ring?
Oh God, no. Well, I tell you, you know, I mean, Haku, you know, everybody talks about this guy and this guy and that guy and, you know, tough guy and Dickie Slater and a lot of guys.
Yeah.
And but I tell you what, that Haku, he's a born killer. And we were in Cleveland, and was this receiver for the Browns owned it. I think his name was Slaughter. He was a little guy. And
Webster Slaughter.
I think, Brian, you were there, and we were sitting with Haku, and we were having a drink, and these football players were mentioning, they were going about wrestling and and Haku put his drink down. He drank cognac and Coke or whatever heck he was drinking, and he put it down. He walked over there, and he says, "Listen," he says, "We're here just to relax and have a good time." He says, "I hope you understand." He says, "I don't want any trouble with you." And he turned around and he didn't say a damn word. He was a killer.
That's the best kind of bar fight. A non-bar fight just led by a heck of an intimidator.
It's funny because,
you know, that one fight he got in, you know, he hit 3 guys and he chopped the guy in the back of it on the side of the ear and then hit a guy right in the nose. And then the other guy jumped up and Haku dove across the table and bit his nose off and spit it in his face.
Oh.
And he had a $700,000 lawsuit against that.
oh God. It's funny because Ricky Santana works with him, and he said he's the head of the complaints department.
Yeah. And in actuality, Ricky's setting it up, so he's on the show with us.
Yeah,
and,
he's going to be on the show.
He's going to be on the show with us, and
I love Ricky. I love Ricky, and I love Haku, man. They're neighbors, and
yeah, they said they're close to
great
you.
people.
Yeah.
They're two very wonderful guys.
Now, let me go back a little bit. You guys, and I saw this interview. I forget where it was at. I think it was with you, Brian. They talked about the time when they put you and Jim together. And it was my understanding was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was that it was like you guys were put together. You guys are going to be on in like 15 minutes, come up with a name. And then you guys barely came up with the name.
It was about an hour, I think.
Okay. And you guys came up with the Killer Bees name, correct?
We came up with the name in about 15 minutes.
Okay. Now, do you currently both own that? Does anybody own that? Does WWE own that? The name?
I think WWE owns the Killer Bees as far as Brunzell and Blair, although they haven't done anything with it for 20 years because we don't get royalties anymore.
Right.
But we have in the past been able to sign with independent company that has made some dolls for us that we were paid pretty generously. But I think as far as Brunzell and Blair, the Killer Bees, I know I never did anything to copyright the name, and I don't know if Brian did, but I think that's in the Vince McMahon WWE catalog.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. No, that's good to know.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it is right, and Vince is really cool about it, though. You know, I mean, as long as you're not out there throwing pitchforks at him, he's not going to say anything. He's been very kind about it. I mean, he knows that we're all hurting. You know, the older you get, the more aches and pains you got, the more you suffered.
Amen.
And you'll never replace all that missed time with your family.
Nope.
the way the guys suffered in this business with no compensation is really a shame.
Yes.
For the guys, because there's so many guys that never save their money. And that's what's so awesome about the Cauliflower Alley Club. And that's why I'm so involved in that, as Jimmy well knows. I mean, we've helped over 20 people just since the last reunion.
Oh, wow.
Got another one coming up April 29th. But I mean, good people. I mean, people, we don't disclose names, but unless people tell us to, but there's good people that have told us, like Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, Brickhouse Brown, Bobby Heenan. We help a lot of great people. Jerry Gray, a young guy who worked in Florida for a long time. He's had cancer, and he is just so thankful because we've helped him with his pay for his treatments. And done a lot of things. Cauliflower Alley Club is run by all volunteer group of people. Like, we pay for our own airfare, we pay for all of our own expenses in Vegas, and just like anybody else would, we even buy our own reunion ticket, which is $125. But and then we work all year long. We do it because we love the people that we worked with, our colleagues. Even if one time we had disagreements or whatever, we still reach out, regardless of the situation. If they're in need, we're there for them. So
now,
I hope everybody listening will go to caulifloweralleyclub.org. For $25, you can become a member.
That's what I was going to ask you, because that's something that we could definitely post on our video for you. Because I had several opportunities to talk to several legends, I guess you want to say, and they tell the stories. And at times I remember doing shows, and I remember I used to say, I got to go on early because I had to go to work. And they looked at me, and I was wrestling Ricky Morton. We were out in Allentown, PA. And I asked when I got there, because I didn't even know I was working Ricky. And he goes, I'm cool with that, brother. I said, I have to go to work. I didn't know. They told me I was going on early. He goes, well, how long you been working? I said, in the ring or on my job? He goes, both. Well, I was in the ring for, at that time, maybe 15 years. And I said, I've been working at the same place for 20. And he goes, yeah, make sure you keep that if you can. And he talked to me for like a half hour about different things, how he worked all those years and made so much money, and he was having a hard times making ends meet, this, that, and other thing. And I just looked at him because he was so sincere and truthful about it. And I felt, even now when guys come to town who I know are still doing the circuit, my wife's really cool. I got a big house. They all come stay at my house all the time. I just told them I can't afford to feed them, but they come and stay. They come and stay all the time. And during town, they'll call. I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, come to the show. I was like, if I can, but feel free just to give a call. You can come sleep in the spare room. I know how it is. I remember sleeping in a $20 hotel where you didn't want to lay on the bed.
That's really kind of you, Mark, man. That's awesome. Jimmy, I was just thinking about Australia, and they'd probably like to hear some stuff about Australia. Jimmy and I were actually the real part of the real pioneer team for WWE. I mean, it was the first Royal Rumble, the first Survivor Series, WrestleMania, the early WrestleManias, 2, 3, 4. Even we were at 5. We didn't get paid at 5. But Australia, we've been all around the world and together. But Australia was one of my favorite places, and we get to Australia and we find this cab driver, and
Way Out Willie.
And as soon as he stopped to pick us up in the cab, they opened up the door, and it was like Cheech and Chong. The smoke just billowed out. And that was our introduction to Australia. We were in Sydney at that time. We went all over the country. It was unbelievable. But anyway, we met some great people, huh, Jimmy?
Oh God, we had a great time, and the food was good. And I remember
Terry Funk's calling me. Terry Funk's calling me. I'm gonna tell him to call me back, and I'll call him back. No, go ahead.
Okay. So I remember they took us to a sort of like a petting zoo, and they gave us a koala bear, and this koala bear crawled all over us, and it was the cutest damn thing. And I remember, we worked mostly with Iron Sheik and Nikolai over there, and it was, you know, it was like going to a dentist and having a root canal without Novocaine. But we managed through that.
You mean working with Sheik? Working with Sheik and Bill? Oh, absolutely.
One thing I'll say, I remember this was the very first time, it's neither here nor there, but it was one of the very first times this Willie, this cab driver, took us way the heck over by this Bondi Beach, and they had this, like a VFW club over there, and they had a band there, and so we go in there and have a couple drinks, and then they had a doggone alcohol analyzer there, free. So, you know, you press this button and the straw would come out, and then you blow it in and you put the straw into the deal, and it'd tell you what your alcohol content was. And this was back in 1986. I thought, you know, they got a lot of horns in Australia, you know, they got a lot of people who drink a lot, but it was sort of unique because even to this day, there might be some private clubs, and I know you can buy a little breathalyzer. They're called the Hawk, alcohol Hawk, or whatever it is. But I just thought that was a great idea, you know, for people that were conscious enough and sober enough to realize they might have had too much to drink and they might need a cab. But, you know, I know it doesn't pertain. You know, we had to go all the way over to Australia.
Hey, we should start selling those in America. I never thought about that, Jimmy.
They have them in the bars.
Charge, just like a little slot machine. They put in, we'll call it the Killer Bees breathalyzer. And,
smack your face right on it.
They'll put in $1 to check your breath.
You put it right next to those massage chairs in the mall. It'd be fantastic.
We need to go. Yeah, we need to get on that gimmick show with the for the inventions. But anyway, but one of the things that I liked about that tour as well, Jimmy remembers every detail. But the characters we hung around with, George Thorogood.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I mean, George Thorogood, what an interesting character George is. We wound up, Jimmy and I pulled up the seat for George, and right at the corner at the ring post. So each night there in Sydney, we were in Sydney and somewhere else. He was in a couple towns, and then Los Lobos was there as well.
Oh. That's who we went and saw. That's who we went and saw at the doggone DFW club. That's
Los
I remember the band. Yeah. That was them.
Yep, that's right. Los Lobos. So that was quite an experience. I love the kangaroos. We got to do all the koala bears, and all that. It was a great tour. I'd love to go there again.
Now, on the average, how many days were you on the road, would you say, back then?
27 days. 3.5 years. I got it down. I went through my my books from the WWE, and that's what we averaged, and that was the average. We went 40 some days, I think, didn't we, Brian? 49 or 47 days. 40. Yeah, I know we went. Was it 49 or 60 something? I don't know, but I remember I broke my hand. John Valentine broke my hand in Rockford. I went home, missed one day, and came back, had a cast on, and we won more matches with that cast than we ever did with the drop kick or he cheated against those bastards.
Jimmy, think about this. I just calculated what you calculated. The 27 days a month, 3 straight years that we were together. We wrestled 4,212 matches, guys.
Wow.
And that's not
think about that. Now you can talk to somebody and say, how long you been wrestling? 15 years? Wow, that's awesome. Right. How many matches did you have in 15 years?
Me, in 15 years, I would say maybe 2000.
No, I'm not talking you. No. I'm just talking in general.
I'm going with maybe 2000.
How often did you guys work?
Jesus, that's a lot. Now,
well,
I mean, at your age,
when we first started, I mean, when I'm sure Brian did this in Florida and I did in Kansas City. I mean, there was times when you come out in the opening match, you come back in a tag match, and then you come back in a, whatever it was, a battle royal. So sometimes you work 3 times a night.
Yeah.
And you got $27.50.
You got that much?
And,
you got that much?
Yeah, and that was a big payday.
I bought you a couple of hot dogs.
You know, you just said something, Jimmy, that really screwed my calculations up, because I forgot all the times we worked 2 and 3 times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not just the days. I remember in Hamilton, Ontario, when the weather was so bad in Rockville, and everybody was like a skeleton crew, and we had to work 3 times. Oh,
wow.
I worked 3 times.
I remember
I think you worked twice.
I remember towards the end of your tenure, it was right around the time that they were pushing Hulk Hogan and Ted DiBiase at that time for the world title. And we're out of Philadelphia. So we were at the old Philadelphia Spectrum watching a house show. And the big thing that was on television was that Ted DiBiase bought somebody close to Hogan that was going to screw him. And who's it going to be? And the title's coming home to me, blah, 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 right? So everybody's like, oh, who's it going to be? Who's going to turn bad? Who's going to turn heel, you know? And it was, we go there, and towards the end of the match, these 2 relatively chubby guys in Killer Bee t-shirts and the masks come out, and they hit Hogan, right? And you can tell this is not the 2 of you because these guys are so grossly out of shape.
They were built like me.
They were these 2 big. The only thing they weren't were like black. They were like they were at least white guys, but they were like these big. They were like these big out of shape guys. They were in workout pants and Killer Bee t-shirts and the masks, and they fight. And Hogan does his Hulk up thing, and he points to them, and then they run out. So you're like, oh my God, it's the Killer Bees. It's the Killer Bees. And then you never hear from it again. After that, it was like, they didn't even bother like moving the storyline along or anything like that. But,
well, this reminds me of something. And I remember this match. It was in Lake Placid, and it was on TV, and it was an 8-man tag, and it was Brian and myself, and it was Coco Beware. And, gosh dang it. God darn it, Jim. He just passed away.
Owen Hart,
bald-headed guy. Got it. You see the turnbuckle.
Oh, George the Animal. George Steele.
George the Animal Steele.
Yeah.
So at the end of the match, what happened was all 4 of us had these masks on. Our masks. So you had George the Animal Steele. He had the mask on sideways. He was trying to bite the guy. Coco Beware was in the middle of the ring doing the bird. And Brian and I were looking at each other, and I just said to Brian, I said, that's the end of the Killer Bees right tonight. We never recouped from that one.
how could you?
Now I have a question for you. When you worked with George the Animal, was he still doing the magic tricks back then? Because he used to do sleight of hand magic tricks. I did several shows with him up here, and he used to show us magic tricks all day. It was great. It passed the time in the back. He said he had been doing it all his life. So just wonder if he still did.
I don't remember him doing that.
No?
He was pretty businesslike when I was around him. But
Okay.
I know the last year of his active involvement in wrestling, he was pretty sick. He had Crohn's disease, which was very bad, and he fought through it, and he was a real trooper.
Yes.
Now, back then, it was always very, I guess, I don't want to say rumor, but it was always like talked about how Dynamite Kid, primarily, but Dynamite Kid, Davey Boy Smith were really good ribbers in the locker room. And they used to rib with the Heart Foundation and stuff like that. Did you guys ever get involved in that kind of stuff?
San Francisco without Back Jack. What a story that was, huh, Jimmy?
Oh, geez. Well, that and with Terry Taylor, Dynamite. If Dynamite liked you, you were okay. But if he didn't like you, he was tending to, really push the limits. I remember, Terry was a real handsome guy, and he sort of fancied himself after Ric Flair, and he bought expensive clothes, and he had these $85 tens of plaques on, and every time he'd go in the ring, he'd come back, and Tommy Billington from the Bulldogs, he had a beaking shears, and he cut those Sansa belts off just below the knee. So Terry come and put his pants on, and he looked like he had on capri pants, you know. I mean, they were, and you know, I thought, geez, that's not very, that's not good. And you know, he says, come on, guys, you know, and then they would, you know, they deny it. So I remember we were in Maryland one time and it was snowing outside, and we were wrestling, and I come back and I had this hooded jacket and was hanging on my locker, and I'm standing there, and as I come around the corner, Davey Boy's got a can of whipped cream and he's filling my whole hood with whipped cream. and I looked at him and I said, Davey, I said, what are you doing? And he says, nothing, Jimmy, and he walked away, and that was it. You know, thank God it was just whipped cream.
That's terrible. But what I was talking about was when Mr. Fuji, Outback Jack challenged Mr. Fuji to a drinking contest in San Francisco at the Holiday Inn. So we're in San Francisco at the Holiday Inn, pretty close to the airport, and we've got a nice little bar, and then in front of the bars to the side, and then they have a nice restaurant out front. So Fuji had the Bulldogs at his side, and I already knew something was going to happen, and I'm sure Jim did as well. So we went, and we're all stopped in. We're all drinking together. I think Haku might have come in there that night. There was a bunch of the boys in and out. You may recall Jimmy. And every time Outback Jack used to brag like a son of a gun, and the ribs the Bulldogs did to him, we could talk about for hours about those, just those. But anyway, every time Outback, one of the Bulldogs would distract Outback, and then the other Bulldog would drop a halcyon, just one. But then that happened until he finally fell off the chair backwards.
Damn.
And was really messed up. So Jimmy and I, we all grabbed him and hauled him back, dragged him back to his room. And all of a sudden, the Bulldogs started peeing on him.
I know.
They started peeing in his face. And he goes, I've been peed on by better blokes than you guys, you know, in a very drunken way. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I can't even believe I'm witnessing this. So later on that night, Outback Jack, because he's got those halcyons in him, puts just his hat on, his Outback Jack alligator tooth hat. Well, it was missing a few teeth from the Bulldog, but his Outback Jack hat, which had teeth all the way around it, he puts that on in his boots and nothing else, and walks into the restaurant, staggers into the restaurant.
No, he didn't.
Naked.
Wow.
Oh Lord.
So, I was not in the place, but I heard everybody told me about it, and it was apparently one of the most hilarious things. He sat at the counter naked, asked for service, and then he went and peed in a palm tree, a fake palm tree.
Damn.
I mean, he was messed up.
You didn't fire him either.
No, it's amazing. No, he didn't. You know, because the tag team thing was so over at the time. We had some of the best tag team talent. I mean, we could work with any of the guys that you've mentioned, except the hardest people, honestly, to work with. And I love them. And they could actually get some of the best heat. It wasn't mechanical heat like the Harps would get, but or several of the other teams. But they got really strong, cheap heat and was slick. I mean, they could create a lot of heat, but you just couldn't make a comeback on them because every time you hit them, it was like it was a 4-stage bump. First the one shoulder, one hip, one shoulder, one other elbow. I mean, one elbow, the other elbow, finally the back. And then you had to pick them up. Where the heel's supposed to be feeding you, you'd have to bend over and pick the guys up, and then it was a shoot. You have to shoot with them to pick them up for an ass bump or a suplex or whatever. It was a shoot.
And then the next day we had to be treated for hemorrhoids.
I mean, okay, I know we're not supposed to talk about this, but was there any person that you just said, I do not want to work this individual or this team? Was at any point?
Well, I'll tell you, two guys that were hard to work with, that were great guys, they just didn't want to work with us.
Oh, okay.
Was Don Morocco and Bobby Orton.
Oh, okay.
For some reason or other,
I loved working with them.
I know, but they didn't want to work with us. I mean, in California, remember they had sort of bee up the rear, and they said, they kill their bees, and I thought, oh God.
No, they didn't want to put us over.
Is that
Right.
Is that because of? Do you think that's because of your? Because I've watched you guys. Your pace sometimes. I mean, you can go up and down when you needed to, but your pace. I remember watching like, oh, I would hate to work them because your pace. Like some guys, their pace is a natural pace, like the things you do. And I remember
you guys
since
were like turbo.
Yeah, you guys
the
could
whole
move,
time.
and with your size, I always thought you guys could really move with your size. Like you were a good size. You had a good like shape. You had a good. I mean, everything about it was
35.
Yeah, 235. That's a lightweight to me. But
one steroid test either. Neither one of us.
See, that's
Right.
good. See, that's
That was
great.
235. I mean, not that I haven't taken a couple steroids, but I was never a steroid freak. Neither was Jimmy. And
Right.
that was just one thing that was good. We worked out hard, and
That's probably why we didn't get the
200
That was- well, if you don't mind me asking, how much do you weigh now?
stayed 235 pounds, and healthy. So, I mean, look at Jimmy. He's 76 right now, and look how healthy he is.
75.
75.
75. Yeah.
I really do think. I mean,
man.
I didn't realize it was that long ago.
I'm still jealous of Jimmy because he looks younger than me.
Yeah.
And I'm 10 years younger than Jimmy.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
9 years.
Now, you know the funny thing was
$200,000 on supplements.
now Jimmy.
Yeah.
One a day is expensive.
I got a heated teepee in Vadnais Heights. It's not a house anymore. It's just a teepee. But, my wife and I get by in it.
No, he's got a really nice house. Don't let him rock you like this.
Now, Jimmy, going back a little bit, and by the way, just to go back to a previous statement, I did have that Jim Brunzell high flyer action figure. So I'm sorry. So I'm sorry if you didn't get any royalty from that. But I did have that figure.
It just, it got whittled down a little bit between Vince and my lawyer.
But I mean, I definitely knew. And granted, I mean, Jim and I talked about this because we're in our 40s, mid 40s, and me.
I'm not in my mid 40s. I'm 50.
Yeah,
Let's get. I'm proud of that right now.
There you go. You gotta own it, I guess.
I'm proud of it.
But the thing was, I mean, I knew because I watched AWA in the Philadelphia area. At least we had on ESPN. We had AWA wrestling 4 times a week or 5 times a week, and so we were able to see AWA in its early day and current day. Then also we had the WWF, and then Jim Crockett Promotions came in afterwards. So we had a lot of wrestling that we could choose from. But then when you guys came to the WWF, and I said, oh, well, that's Jim Brunzell. I have that action figure. You got to remember, I was a kid back then. I'm like, oh, I have that action figure. And I'm like, but then when you guys came in, I was like, oh, this is really good. This is really good. And you guys mentioned teams like the Can-Am Connection, Martel and Zinc and stuff like that. But it kind of like threw me a little bit because like when Zinc left and they put Santana in there, because I guess Santana was the golden boy of WWF at that time because we couldn't not let him be on television for some reason. So let's put him with Martel. They created Strike Force. I was like, shouldn't the Bees have been in that position to be the next tag team to carry the belts for a little bit? Or did they?
Absolutely.
But the WWE defies all logic. So,
Yes.
It what possibly should be and what probably should be never happened.
Yeah.
So that's okay. I mean, people ask me about the WWE Hall of Fame and ask me how come we were never champs. And it's just, I mean, that was just part of the business that they had to deal with. I mean, if there was personality conflicts or whatever.
They promised us the belts 3 times.
Oh, okay.
Really? Okay.
But they had their fingers crossed. I know they did.
And then what were their answers when it didn't happen?
That's a shoot.
Yeah.
Vince Jr. himself promised me and George Scott twice.
Yeah.
Now, was that because of backstage?
That's is pretty sad. That he let some kind of egotistical problem,
Yeah.
mess with all the hard work that we put in.
Well, that's always been the case,
all
don't
the
you think?
sacrifices, all the sacrifices
Yeah.
that you go through with your family, all that number of days, all those. We put a lot of butts in a lot of seats. We made
Yeah.
a lot of times we were strong on the card, and it just it was just kind of
It just,
I don't know. Never say never.
it's one of those things
Yeah,
where
it wasn't meant to be.
right.
That's
And
the way you got to look at it. And, we still had a hell of a run. We maintained our families and
yeah.
it came out of it, with our health and at least our brains. So, it was a great run. Not many people had the opportunities and the success that the Killer Bees had. We had a very blessed career. And, you just got to say, well, that's in the past. And hopefully maybe someday, maybe Vince will stop. And they say there's going to be a WrestleMania here at the new U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis and St. Paul in the next 2 years. So I figured maybe that might be a time because then he wouldn't have to spend any money there. I'd be 15 miles from the stadium and trying to stay at my house, and he wouldn't have to pay for our lodging.
There you
Now, do either one of you have
There you
any
go.
family in the business right now?
Who knows?
Oh,
Hey,
you know what?
not to mention the fact that I've been an elected politician.
Yeah.
Jesse Ventura gets a lot of credit. Governor's higher than a county commissioner, but in our county, we're larger than 10 other states.
Oh, wow.
okay.
Hillsborough County, Florida, Google it, is larger than the population of 10 other states.
Okay.
So, and we're about the size of Rhode Island. We're 1,078.2 square miles. Rhode Island's 1,221. But you have to. I had almost 800,000 people vote in my election.
Wow.
Now,
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to hit.
Wow.
And I've never lost a primary. I've been into politics a lot, and it's just another thing to add to the resume. But I don't know what it would take for Jimmy had a stellar amateur career. We both did amateur stuff. There's a lot of other things to add to the resume, not just Killer Bee stuff. We do a lot of things in our hometowns, charity work, things like that.
If the Rock and Roll Express got into the Hall of Fame, and 2 or 3 pro football players, and who was the guy that gave us our jackets? The piano player,
Liberace.
He was in it too. So there's always place for Brunzell and Blair.
You know what? Was the last time they put Kid Rock in there, and I almost threw up. But yeah, I was like, you got to be kidding me, Kid Rock. And it was ridiculous. But
Jimmy just told you as a Killer Bees, we just worked 4,221 days. Got to add, close to 5,000 matches. That deserves something.
absolutely.
Let me ask you this: because in season 1 of our show, we were the first show we ever did was tag teams, and obviously you guys came up. But later on in the season, we did a show called Fantasy Promotion, where we basically, as wrestling fans, as workers, said, I really would have loved if this happened, if that happened. And one of my fantasy promotions was to have the Killer Bees move over to Jim Crockett Promotions after their run in WWF, and then do a program with the Midnight Express with the mask gimmick and everything, and having I just thought it would be such a phenomenal thing to watch. even if it was just a chasing the U.S. tag titles or something like that. Why did the Bees not go television-wise beyond the World Wrestling Federation?
Well, we did. A lot of people don't realize how many places that we went to right after because the television was far behind.
Yeah.
Many places. We were all over the place, for years.
Okay.
Not just UWF, but we did. I worked with a military. I got military shows. Worked. Dick Worley promoted some great shows. I mean, we were Singapore, Malaysia. Just a place called how many people have been to Kota Kinabalu? Never forget going to Malaysia and the Nasty Boys are on the plane and Bulldog Bob Brown's got his son next to him.
Right.
And the Bulldogs kept cracking on Bulldog Bob Brown and it kind of peed me off. But anyway, Sterility. He started saying something about calling him senile. And I said, don't say that. Use some kind of a gimmick name. And he said, how about Sterility? I thought that was okay. So instead of calling him senile or Sterility, but those guys could be nasty when they're on a long tour. And we've Frenchie Martin, golly, with such memories. We see Frenchie just bought some new suits. Go to his room. He's drunk. Stands up on the bed and starts peeing all over the place. And, just memories you'll never forget. The boys being the boys.
A lot of urination.
But to answer your question, we went to a lot of places, on the independent circuit.
Right.
But Brian, we have to qualify the fact that Jim Crockett's promotion was done when we were in the.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Every promotion was done. There was nothing left. I mean,
exactly.
26 territories, they became the WWE. So there was no.
We could have gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
CW.
Jimmy elected to come back and stay there. And I opened up Gold Shims, started with one, put 4, had over 12,000 members, public record. I sold them for $2.1 million. And you have to list that on everything that you file when you're a politician your whole life. So anyway, and Steve Kern helped me. He wound up owning 20% of my Tampa Palms facility. He's a great guy.
Okay.
Trained more people in professional wrestling than anybody that is active today. Steve lives in Tampa too. Great guy. But, there's a lot of great things about the business, and I always say, you can take the wrestler out of the ring, but you'll never take the ring out of the wrestler.
Yeah.
And I'll always have the love for the business, the passion for it. I still work in the ring. We sign autographs and we do Comic Cons, and Jimmy's new comic book just came out. You can go to inversepress.com and check out Jimmy's new comic book. It is awesome.
Jimmy told me about this. If you guys could.
Guys, comic books, a lot of different wrestling stars at inversepress.com. Go to thekillerbees.net. Most of all, please don't forget about www.caulifloweralleyclub.org.
Yes.
But I got to check out, guys. I got to call Terry Funk back, and I'm actually having lunch with Dory Funk Jr.
Oh, well, tell him hello.
At 1 p.m. at La Teresita, Tampa.
Brian, say hi to both of them for me, and then I'll get back to you on I just got a email from Tor Okerlund, so I will send that to you about the services for Gene.
Okay. Hey, thanks, guys. And,
well, thank you very much. We thank you for your time.
I gotta get a quart of orange blossom special and chug it on down so I can get my toes tapping, my wings flapping, my jaw jacking, and get ready for some back cracking. So anyway, I'm gonna check out, guys. Jimmy, I love you. And
you too, Brian.
Peace.
Thank you
To you guys, Danny, Mark, Charles, and all the audience. Take care. Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year to you.
Godspeed.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Brian.
you so
Definitely.
much, Brian.
And we
Bye-bye,
still,
Jimmy.
Bye-bye.
and Jimmy, we still have you, right?
Yeah, I'm still here.
We still got Jimmy.
Well, Jimmy, we as Way Cool Russ, we really appreciate your time that you gave us. I mean, this is something that we started up. We're getting several guys. We're getting several hits, and it's great to have someone that I like myself grew up watching.
Yeah.
And like I said, at times trying to emulate, and I say at times try to emulate.
Yeah.
But no, we really appreciate your time. You guys are just wonderful.
Yeah.
And
I said this to you before. I said, you know, our show is very old school. We talk about a lot of old school wrestling because I honestly believe that's when wrestling was great, to cliche, if anything. But, you know, if anything, the younger fans that watch our show, we like to have guys like yourself, like Brian, like Haku, etc., so that they can actually see where this all came from. You know what I mean? I mean, granted, it came from before you guys too, but you guys were the highlight, I think, of wrestling. I think 85 through 89 was like the champagne of wrestling.
I have guys that I know that stop me and they say, well, you mentioned this person, so I went on YouTube. And dude, they were great. Yeah. They were great. I'm like, told you, just listen to me and I'll tell you.
I just as not to bring up somebody else, but we had Reno Riggins on just a couple of shows ago. And, you know, I posted, you know, on Facebook that we had the show going and whatever. And a fan posted on the Facebook page. He said, listen, I watched the show, which I was like, oh, great. Somebody watched the show, which is cool. But he said, I forgot how good you were. So then I started looking up more of your stuff. And I watched you against Flair and I watched you against this and that and the other thing. And he goes, I really want to say that I did not give you the respect as a fan back then that I should have. And I want to give it to you now. And I thought that was just a great thing that we were able to produce that with this show, which is why we do this show and stuff like that.
Well, that was nice. It was very nice to you because, and you know, the guy, but you know, so many, you know, people associate what they see when they're young, and it becomes, you know, marked in their mind, you know, as part of their youth. And even though I haven't been on TV in years, and I go places, you know, and it's funny because we'll go on trips and people will say, you were the wrestler. And I said, yeah, I was. And they said, yeah. And then, sometimes you'll go to a nightclub or a bar and some fellow who might be overserved will come up to you and he'll look at you and he'll sort of circle you and he'll point his finger at you and he says, I know you from somewhere.
How many free drinks did that give you?
I think I was at Stillwater State Prison in 1984. Were you there with me?
No.
And then they usually turn around and walk away. But I wanted to, as long as Brian was plugging I wanted to plug my 2015 autobiography. It's called Matlands, True Stories from the Wrestling Road. It took me 5 years to write this book. Mm-hmm. A real interesting book, 45 stories, great pictures from my home library. My wife typed and retyped and typed and retyped and edited and re-edited this book. Right. It's available online from a company called Blurb, B-L-U-R-B. Okay. And if you were to Google Matlands by Jumpin' Jim, it'll show you it's $25. It's a great book. I just
awesome.
And we didn't get a chance to talk about Gene Okerlund, our dear friend who passed away this past week. He was a dear friend of mine, and I did some radio work the other day talking about him and just about his presence and his warmth and his professionalism and his genius. And in this book, I have a chapter on the men behind the mic, and I really say, you know, how I feel and how the wrestling world feels and thinks of Gene Okerlund today as him being the greatest on-air interviewer in the wrestling profession. And it's sad, you know, he's 76 years old, and I just got an email from his son about the services. So that'll be a sad send away, but it'll be a great celebration of a wonderful person who who is a mainstay in this business. So
Absolutely.
maybe
I
I'll
mean,
just leave it with that, guys, and I'll say goodbye and thank you very much and have a good year.
Well, thanks for bringing us down, Jim.
We really appreciate it. Like I said,
we really do.
And thank you for your time.
Okay, have a good Happy New Year.
You too.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Okay,
ladies and gentlemen, that was the Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, B. Brian Blair. That was the Killer Bees. What can I say? What a great show we had. We got more shows coming up in future shows. I
just have one question. Is Mark still here?
Mark is here.
Okay.
He's right there.
Okay.
Mark, how you doing, Mark?
You just ignored my question. It's okay.
I didn't even get your question, so that's okay.
Yeah, you didn't. I couldn't hear you say anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
Maybe he texted out. Mark, well, thank you for being on the show. But coming up, we have Hernandez coming up on the show. We have Blake Chadwick, who is the on-air commentator for Ring Warriors, coming up on the show. And we also have the original Patriot, Del Wilkes. Coming on the show as well. So we have and more. Haku, other people are coming on. We're going to talk to Ricky Santana again. We're going to talk to Reno Riggins again because they love the show, which is awesome. And I want to have those guys on as much as possible.
And if any guys out there that we know who you are, not just some backyarder, feel free to contact us, and we would love to set up different interviews, or we'll contact you.
This is true. Now, for Charles Gemini Gregory, for Mad Mark Lindsay, and for the Killer Bees, who we do really thank you for coming on the show. My name is Danny J. Until next time, we'll see you at the matches.
And LeGrand, take care of that itch.
The proceeding was produced by DJB Productions. Go to www.thatwaycoolwrestlingshow.com.